Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Grace Technology sponsored webinar, Critical Updates to NFPA 70B, Enhancing Your Electrical Maintenance Program. My name is Terry Becker. I'll be the presenter today. I just want to again thank Grace and welcome everybody to this webinar. Critical Updates 70B, it's going to be an interesting hour or so, giving my perspective on what happened here in the last year with 70B, significant changes, quite a few significant changes. So my background, my name is Terry Becker. I'm a certified electrical safety compliance professional with NFPA. I'm an IEEE senior member, 33 years experience in electrical engineering. Background, I'm based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, but I do a lot of consulting and support in the United States. My background is oil and gas. I moved from oil and gas to doing independent electrical safety consulting back in 2007 when Canada adopted NFPA 70 as CSA Z462 Workplace Electrical Safety Standard. So I'm a founding member and a voting member on the CSA Z462 Tech Committee. Currently a voting member. I'm the working group leader for Clause 4.1, which is the equivalent of Article 105 and 110. And I'm also the Annexes working group leader on the CSA Z462 Tech Committee. We ended up adopting NFPA 70B. We adopted 70E. We did not adopt 70B. We created our own electrical equipment maintenance standard, CSA Z463. Maintenance of Electrical Systems standard that published as a guideline in 2013, and we published that as a standard in 2018. So I'm a founding member and a working group leader on Clause 4 in CSA Z463. I'm also a voting member on IEEE 1584, the Guide for Arc Flash Hazard Calculation Standard, and recently this year I became a voting member on CAN ULCS 801, Standard on Electric Utility Workplace Electrical Safety for Generation, Transmission, and Distribution, which is the equivalent of IEEE C2, the National Electrical Safety Code in the US. I've been providing independent electrical safety consulting for 17 years. So I provide consulting to Z462 and 70E, and now Z463 and 70B as well. I develop and implement electrical safety programs. I'm just moving into developing and implementing electrical maintenance programs. And I provide a variety of training related to the electrical safety program, as well as generic arc flash and shock training, low and high voltage. I've presented at 95 conferences and workshops in Canada, the United States, Australia, Italy, India in the last 17 years on Z462 and 70E and related topics. You can check my website for more information on myself and my company. I write regular articles in Canada for Electrical Line magazine, probably been doing this for over 12 years with Kevin Burrs, the editor. And those conferences I mentioned, well, this year I presented at both the IEEE Electrical Safety Workshop, 2 papers, and 1 paper at the NETA Power Test Conference. So again, I'm regularly attending these conferences and presenting since 2005. Again, contributing my knowledge and my interpretation of applicable standards and all the related information related to them. So I just want to again thanks Grace for sponsoring this webinar. Again, there's their standard website, Electrical Safety Device Manufacturer, leading in that area. Phil Allen, I was actually I saw Phil at the NFPA 70 2027 edition first revision meetings last week. So he's the founder of Grace Technologies, quite the amazing man and quite the amazing company. So again, Graceport, Grace PSDs, and Grace Sense, just highlighting some of the 3 key products at Grace that actually relate to this topic today. As we get through the webinar, I'll be highlighting as well some synergies between 70E and 70B. So this PowerPoint, the information presented is copyright to my company, TW Becker Electrical Safety Consulting, Inc. No unauthorized video recording or digital photographic images of the PowerPoint, the video images of the instructor, and any of the information presented is authorized. Grace Technologies has authorization to video, and I believe we'll be making this available to you as a video after the webinar. So disclaimer again, the information presented is my personal interpretation. This presentation has no affiliation with NFPA or CSA, and you're advised to consult NFPA and the published 2024 edition of NFPA 70E and the 2023 edition of NFPA 70B for specific formal interpretation. I accept no liability for the information provided. So every time I present at conferences, I always bring up, or usually bring up, this Plan, Do, Check, Act philosophy. It's a continuous improvement philosophy from Occupational Health and Safety Management System standards. So here we are. We're actually doing some planning, doing, checking, and acting today with respect to the 2023 edition of NFPA 70B, and I'm really glad you're all attending. So the agenda: introduction, electrical maintenance program planning workflow, electrical safety due diligence framework, electrical equipment maintenance due diligence framework, and then I'll talk about the 70B 2023 edition, and then summary and closing remarks. So change management is unfortunately a fact of life for everything we do, and related to industry standards, you've got to stay abreast of when the standards change. 70B, again, 2019, I think, was the last edition. This edition moved the document from a guideline to a standard. It is totally different. It's a major rewrite and a major restructuring. So change management is critical if you've been referencing 70B previous to this 2023 edition. So like, it's a couple slides. Knowledge is power. So the Plan, Do, Check, Act philosophy, and we never stop learning, critically important to electrical safety and electrical maintenance. There's been a lot of change on the electrical safety side. Well, every 3 years, 70 changes, but surrounding 70, there's been a lot of activity: PPE, incident reduction strategies, this evolution of the topic of electrical equipment maintenance, which is a critical element for normal operating conditions. And again, there is content in 70E Chapter 2, but that Chapter 2 probably in the next, well, probably 2030 of 70, we'll see it probably get deleted and specifically reference 70B, right? So the standards we use change. Research occurs, new technology, equipment evolution changes, testing changes, new improved arc flash and shock PP tools and equipment, industry growth and evolution, right? And you got to stay abreast of it depending on what industry you're in, whether it's institutional, commercial, or industrial. And the hierarchy of risk controls evolve, and that relates more specifically to 70E than 70B. So knowledge, again, it's this information we know, right? And then the power is, in my opinion, the ability to apply that knowledge correctly, right, to get the true value out of the knowledge. Electrical safety due diligence framework. So it's a busy slide, but it really starts with OSHA regulations, general duty clause, protect workers from all workplace hazards, right? In this case, it's focusing on electric shock and arc flash. Plan, Do, Check, Act philosophy, apply occupational health and safety management system standards when you build an occupational health and safety management system, but when you also build an electrical safety program. And the bottom right, I've listed 3 standards that work together: the National Electrical Code, NFPA 70. Obviously, 70E is the primary standard for electric shock and arc flash hazards, but I've always listed 70B as the 3rd standard, right? Collectively, these standards form what I call the electrical safety trifecta, and it's 70B that we can follow up on and use against, again, our qualitative risk assessment in our electrical safety program to ensure that we have met that requirement of, what is minimum electrical equipment maintenance or satisfactory, or as we'll talk about in this webinar, risk-based maintenance as well, with 70B now putting focus on maintenance for safety and prescribing some maintenance directly related to electrical safety and electric shock and arc flash hazards. So different framework now, but focusing on electrical equipment maintenance due diligence. So same thing, driving this around OSHA and electric shock and arc flash hazards. But there's other elements here that are and have been factored into maintenance, which was really criticality of service, loss of revenue, right, and damage to electrical equipment, insurance implications, some legal implications depending on the type of industry you were. But again, maintenance for safety, I believe that companies would have inherently already had that built in, but now 70B prescriptively does require some maintenance directly related to safety, which again, back to NFPA 70 in normal operating conditions, right? And making sure you have, effective and appropriate electrical equipment maintenance. So in this case, we want an electrical maintenance program developed. Now you can still use sort of the framework and table of contents of a safety management system for your electrical maintenance program, but it is a uniquely different document with respect to, instead of reviewing work task-based risk assessment, we're looking at equipment-based and then using a risk assessment to make decisions related to, again, strategy, inspection and test procedures and the frequency of those inspections and test procedures. And if you're a large enough company, you'll have a computerized maintenance management system, which you'll use to implement your electrical equipment asset list and the related maintenance that you'll execute for your facility. So again, I'm starting with this introductory piece to sort of frame this, how do we use 70B around those frameworks, but this planning workflow. I'm all about planning workflows, in this case, specific to electrical equipment maintenance. So it's electrical maintenance program planning workflow, and it starts at the top with an asset list. You've got to have an asset list. We'll get into that. If you don't have that asset list, you're defining maintenance against, something that's not credible. You have to, and it's the only way to actually do it, is what are my generic electrical equipment assets, and then what's the criteria for prioritization of the electrical maintenance, again, strategies, inspections and test procedures and frequencies. And then again, we want to have a qualitative risk assessment, and I've shown an avatar of a risk assessment matrix. This is what I recommend for both electrical safety and electrical equipment maintenance. Determining your strategies, again, your tests, inspections and test procedures, and your frequencies is using a qualitative risk assessment process. And then we have the CMMS, and we have defined inspections and test procedures that are flushed out of our qualitative risk assessment. And we document any required maintenance and test procedures. We implement those with our computerized maintenance management system, and then we manage change in step 9 and continually review, again, our strategies, our inspections and test procedures, and our frequencies. And if there's any change, then we implement those through, in this case, the electrical maintenance program. And documentation, right? So make sure you have documentation in place, and that would be the outcome too of defined PMs. Make sure you have maintenance and test reports coming back from your maintenance and testing contractor. So qualitative risk assessment, again, this is just an avatar of a qualitative risk assessment matrix, in this case used for electrical maintenance. But what I've done uniquely here is I did layer in arc flash and shock as far as the severity side, and related to H&S safety to personnel as one of the consequences, and therefore a criteria for making decisions with respect to, again, what assets, what electrical equipment assets you would define, again, specific strategies related to inspections and test procedures and frequency of testing. And the consequences, there's actually 4 different consequences, so you've got to basically put weighting on these appropriately. Again, as I said, 70B now puts focus on maintenance for safety, which aligns with NFPA 70E. So 70B 2023 edition, first published in 1973. It was interesting when I look back at the information about 70B. It sort of started with some discussions in the late 60s, but it really didn't get sort of a first publishing until 73, and there's been 15 editions. And it came out of the National Electrical Code Committee that there was injuries occurring, fatalities, and high costs related to electrical equipment damage, so there needed to be a focus on electrical equipment maintenance. So the initial scope was to develop suitable tests relating to preventive maintenance of electrical systems and equipment used in industrial type applications within the view of reducing loss of life and property. So it did have some focus on it, but it was a guideline, and it didn't change to a standard until January 16th last year. So the 15th edition, it's now a standard, and over the years there was significant changes to 70B with respect to the information presented. But this 2023 edition, it's a real change up with respect to the way the chapters are presented and the information is presented in them, and a real rework of the content. Lots of new information, lots of new structure specific to the electrical equipment assets, and again, what's recommended. All right, so we'll take a look at that. And prescriptive language, as I said. So this is a quote that I found from Corey Hannes, the Senior Electrical Content Specialist. It says, it's been 50 years since the first version of 70B was issued in 1973. As a recommended practice, would provide recommendations on what should be done. Now the move to a standard provides more enforceability for what must be done when it comes to electrical equipment maintenance. That's a win-win for both the reliability of electrical equipment and the overall safety of the electrical systems and those individuals tasked with working on them. So again, the focus on maintenance for safety and prescribing some specific, again, maintenance requirements on specific electrical equipment directly related to electrical safety. So it outlines the minimum electrical equipment maintenance requirements as defined by a nationally recognized consensus standard. If an electrical incident occurs involving electrical equipment besides using 70, OSHA can now use 70B with prescriptive language as a base for what should have been done related to electrical equipment maintenance as defined by 70B that may have been a root cause of the electrical incident. So again, I'm not sure if any training's been provided to OSHA on NFPA 70B, but again, there's a quote that now that it's a standard, it gives them the ability to use it in an electrical incident investigation, because electrical equipment maintenance will come up in the electrical incident investigations, especially depending on the severity. If it's a fatality, I know it would be on the list. So the electrical safety trifecta. So I mentioned the three standards working collectively together. So safe installations first. Without safe installations, we really don't have electrical safety at all. So that's the first, again, and legal requirement for both Canada and the US. So I've overlaid the Canadian Electrical Part 1. Then we have safe work practices with 70E, and in Canada Z462. And then the bottom right is the subject for our webinar today, the 2023 edition of 70B. I mentioned CSA Z463 for Canada, but this is the first slide where I've also included the ANSI NETA maintenance testing specifications. And again, that works collectively with 70B. If you're not familiar with the ANSI NETA maintenance testing specifications, I recommend that you get a copy and do a little bit of homework, because it is definitely a supporting document to 70B. It provides a very detailed inspections and test procedures, and then it lists and provides data for those results. For reviewing the results of those testing procedures to garner health as pass-fail or some level of health. And of course, we have the manufacturer's manuals. So there's our sort of first obligation, is that we should be reviewing manufacturer's manuals with respect to electrical equipment maintenance requirements, but they are not 70B at all, and they are not the ANSI NETA maintenance testing specifications. So really, we're delivering an electrical maintenance program using 70B/Z463, and then referencing ANSI NETA MTS for more detailed inspections and test procedures to, again, show due diligence to manufacturers' manuals and their specific requirements. So there is a natural synergy between 70E and 70B. There was, even when it was a recommended practice. There's also a synergy between an employer's electrical safety program and an electrical maintenance program. So the chapters in the 2019 edition of 70B, I thought I'd start here, right? So just briefly list them, and then I'm going to show you the 2023 table of contents and chapters, and use color to sort of show you what's sort of changed, right? So basically chapters 1 through, it looks like 12, right, were more generic information. And then chapters 13 all the way down to 35 were electrical equipment specific requirements. So that general framework has been maintained in 70B 2023, but there's been a lot of movement of information, as well as the annexes, movement of information, or reorganization of information in the annexes. So that's the 2019 chapter list. This is the 2023 edition chapter list. So the first three chapters are the same, but now highlighted in yellow is where things have moved, or content has been moved or complemented or added to or new. Like if you do have a copy of 70B, right, which I do, you'll have the standard, designations where it does show you with, again, some guidance on the bottom, what's new content or modified content. And I think you'll see a lot of the large N where indicating new content or movement of content. So again, the first chapters are more generic information, but this is where I said some things have changed. And I've cross-referenced the chapter from the 2019 edition in brackets on this slide. All right, so you can see that chapter 5 was chapter 7, right? Chapter 6 was chapter 9, chapter 7 was chapter 8. So again, some things have moved structurally, right? And then content has been updated as well within the chapters. All right, so maintenance intervals, well, that actually moved Annex L completely into a chapter. All right, so that was actually an important move actually for the maintenance intervals, now in chapter 9 of the 2023 edition. And again, this is where we get into some of the electrical equipment, the specific electrical equipment. So there's new electrical equipment added or electrical equipment that's been broken out that might have been included under another chapter. So, and again, you can see the cross-reference chapters. Like I said, it's a fundamental restructure, and you got to get your head wrapped around it. And today's maybe the start of that for you. But again, just back to this slide, the chapters, right, have fundamentally the same sort of format: general first, electrical equipment maintenance specific, and then the annexes. But just one more time, major restructuring, major movement of content, and then within the electrical equipment specific chapters, complete rewrite, right? Complete rewrite with new information added, okay? And like I said, in the annexes, you can see that the annexes have been thinned a bit, some information deleted or moved around, like Annex L was completely moved into a chapter, which was appropriate and required, all right? So, and again, I'll maybe highlight some of the, I think I've highlighted one of the annexes later that I don't think a lot of people know about at the end of the presentation. So on the left of this screen is the new scope and purpose, or the updated scope and purpose of 70B, right? So it says this standard covers the preventive maintenance of electrical, electronic, and communication systems and equipment. And it says the purpose. The purpose of the standard is to provide for the practical safeguarding of persons, property, and processes from the risks associated with failure, breakdown, or malfunction, and a means to establish condition of maintenance of electrical equipment systems for safety and reliability. And on the top right is the old scope and the old purpose. So again, a rejigging and refocus of the statements of the purpose of 70B 2023 now as a standard with prescriptive content. So I'm just going to highlight some stuff from chapter 4. And again, this gets back to what I just mentioned. We've got the manufacturer's recommendations. We've got 70B now as a standard. And then in support of inspections and test procedures is the ANSI NETA Maintenance Testing Specifications. Now, the ANSI NETA Maintenance Testing Specifications do include some tools to determine, again, maintenance intervals or frequency of tests, right? So that's where these all really work together and complement each other. And 70B is the document that talks about an electrical maintenance program, but the content in chapter 4 is not very detailed. And this is where I do recommend, if you know, in the States, that you do look at our CSA Z463 maintenance of electrical system standard, because it has an abundance of information and a lot more detail on building an electrical maintenance program. All right, so document electrical equipment asset classification. So in the EMP planning workflow, I said you really got to start with an electrical equipment asset classification inventory for your facility. You've got to get that. And on the screen, what I've shown is 70B has 27 unique electrical equipment assets. All right. Believe it or not, the ANSI NETA Maintenance Testing Specifications has 27 unique electrical equipment assets, but unfortunately combined, it results in a 39 unique electrical equipment assets. So that's where you need to sort of blend these standards again. And again, I only have a little bit of time today to really discuss this, but you got to start here. But we'll start with 70B, 27 assets, but in the ANSI NETA Maintenance Test, it also has 27, but you combine them and get 39 unique electrical equipment assets. And I'd recommend that you do that, and that you get this inventory built around this generic electrical equipment asset list. And that's the document that you see that I've created, is to create an overlap between the assets and then use that as the basis for your specific facility electrical equipment asset classification inventory. And you can start with your single line diagrams. I know that this is an ongoing issue for my whole career and everybody's career. You know, we can't seem to get as-built, electrical single line diagrams, but this is the opportunity to do that. If you don't have a defined electrical equipment asset classification inventory, then you'll be using your SLDs and your actual physical electrical equipment to create this asset classification inventory. All right, so as built your SLDs and then extract the information from them and actually check it, because it then should match the physical electrical equipment that you're going to list, right, in this generic list for your facility. All right, so document electrical and asset classification, use it to assess the specific, again, strategies, inspections and test procedures and frequencies that you will then, and I recommend a qualitative risk assessment, decide to implement against each generic asset, which is like switchgear, MCCs, circuit breakers, right? And that's sort of again, the actual specific assets that are, again, started in 70B with 27, but there's some overlap and some unique electrical equipment asset identification in the ANSI NETA MTS standards. The cool thing is that you can actually use that electrical equipment asset classification inventory to decide where you need to install arc flash and shock equipment labels, because that's where the, again, qualified person is going to be doing work. This maintenance work that we're actually defining, right? That actually, there's where we're going to need the actual ANSI energy calculations completed for. So for the arc flash hazard and energy analysis studies, I've always said to clients, you need to get an electrical equipment asset list, and let's define then if we're going to have work completed at that asset, and then we need an ANSI energy calculation, and then you can get a better quote on the actual cost to do that study, or more definitive, again, bus count and or equipment label count at the end of the day, right? So again, this electrical equipment asset classification inventory has multiple uses. So if you've created it to define where you want arc flash and shock equipment labels, then in turn you could use that to evaluate, again, your electrical equipment maintenance strategies, your inspections and test procedures, and again, your maintenance intervals or frequency of your tests. So an electrical maintenance program, like I said, in Chapter 4 of 70B, the 2023 edition, there isn't a lot of information. This is where I'd say it's weak. This is where 70B is very weak. On the screen is actually a framework and table of contents for an electrical maintenance program. Now, I've actually created this framework and the content with the synergy of an electrical safety program and then the unique content related to obviously electrical equipment maintenance. But Chapter 4 doesn't have a lot of detail, but in CSA Z463 for Canada, we have a phenomenal amount of detail on building the MP and, again, this risk assessment process, procedure, and tool that can be used. So here's a simple process that really, what 70B is getting you to implement. It's IC-TOD, inspect, clean, test, operate, and document. Again, we've got 70B for the US, we've got the manufacturer's manuals, and the ANSI NETA Maintenance Testing Specifications. So inspect, right? And you can have inspection checklists, right? This will be part of, again, your electrical maintenance program, because you want to have the inspections and test procedures. You need documentation that is completed by your staff, or in turn, your maintenance and testing specialist, which typically going to be in the US, I would recommend a NETA certified electrical maintenance testing and inspection contractor. They'll have these checklists, but if you do your own inspections and test procedures with your own qualified persons, then you in turn should also have these types of checklists. Now, some of these are independently that I've developed, but some of these are also in 70B in the annexes. And again, I think that's been missed by many users in 70B. All right, so inspect, right? Some pictures of what you might find when you inspect. This is what I found when I've inspected, doing external electrical safety audits, right? Yep, that's a snake in the middle. Again, the National Electrical Code on the far right, I don't think it would sponsor that you can use concrete blocks to support your high voltage busway. Yeah, we got water coming in and we use plastic to protect the equipment from the water ingress. I call this the magic box, right? And that was actually energized. I'm amazed this facility had reliability and that it didn't have a lot of faults occurring. And you might find some labels that are interesting. This was a label, I can't remember where I got this from, it's a while back, but yeah, 25,330.1 calories per centimeter squared. So this would be another thing in your inspections that you might catch related to the arc flash international studies. The label doesn't make any sense. Again, this picture, yeah, that I don't even know how that's energized. It's mind-boggling, but I'm sure all of you have seen interesting installations out there. And again, this is just a lack of I don't know what I would call it with respect to the workers that have gone into this panel, but that isn't properly maintained, right? That should be clean. The panduit should be covered. Again, this is what you find when you inspect, and then the outcome is, resolving that we need to do some maintenance. That's a breaker that needs a lot of maintenance. That I think was a mining application. Even the stabs on MCC starter bucket, you can see some dust and some dirt accumulating. Yeah, that's an interesting picture, that one. And rodents nests. right? So again, you've got to manage rodents and in turn that they might nest inside your electrical equipment. That's actually another snake picture. This one's from southern Alberta. Actually, believe it or not, we got rattlesnakes in the south of Alberta, about 3 hours south of Calgary, right? So again, when you inspect, in this case, the rattlesnake wasn't there, thankfully. And we do get some blizzards up in Canada. So when you walk around and do some inspections when the weather isn't too good, like a blizzard, you might find that the weather unfortunately gets into your facility and on top of your MCC in this case. So that is actually snow, crystallized snow that hasn't melted yet because the blizzard was full on. So that's a real-time inspection. In clement weather, maybe we should do rounds and look for any issues due to the weather. Clean the equipment, test it, and then operate it, and then document your results. Chapter 7, just again moving quickly through 70B. So fundamental tests. Again, 3 things were identified: bolted bus connections, conductor terminations, and conductor connections, insulation resistance, quality, and infrared thermography. So these fundamental tests, they'll be used where required elsewhere in the standard due to as defined by East Peach of electrical equipment later on. So this is where we get into some of the new content in the core chapters. So field testing and test methods. There's now 4 categories of electrical maintenance testing. And again, it's category 1, online standard test, category 1A, online enhanced test, category 2, offline standard test, and category 2A, offline enhanced test. And these, again, testing category types are defined in new tables that I'm going to show you shortly within the chapters for the specific electrical equipment maintenance. So it'll define the test and then it'll categorize them within the applicable table. And actually, there's the example table. This one's for substation and switchgear visual inspections. So you can see the task, and then it'll show you the different testing category types that are recommended, in this case, voltage dependent. So in chapter 9, the maintenance intervals, this was moved from Annex L. Like I said, there's been a real major rejig here. And if you have the 2019 edition and you put it beside the 2023 edition, it's quite apparent what's happened. And really, I would just get into 2023 and get familiar with it because the 2019 edition is no longer valid anyways. And then bridge like something like this webinar is doing, giving you again quickly the Cole's notes on what's transpired. So major structural changes, things moved around, content maybe gone, contents moved from here to there or an annex into a chapter like this chapter. All right, so then it's now this table 922 maintenance intervals that was extracted from Annex L. Chapters 11 through 36 are these electrical equipment specific information, and these where these tables are added. So this table, right, has been added, but there's been more than one table added. There's sort of general information related to each piece of electrical equipment, and then a visual inspection table, a cleaning table, a lubrication table, mechanical testing table, and an electrical testing table. Now I've noted on the slide the cleaning, the lubrication, the mechanical testing, it's where applicable to the specific piece of electrical equipment that those tables may be included in the chapter or not. All right, and then within these tables again is the testing category type, So I've just listed, these slides just illustrate some of those tables. In this case, again, this one's for MCCs, and you'll see chapter 8, section A3 is where we have the categories defined. All right, so we've got, and again, the next table, all right, with respect to lubrication, mechanical servicing, electrical testing. I believe this was cleaning, but I cut it off. Yes, it was cleaning, but I cut it off. All right, so visual inspections, cleaning, lubrication, mechanical servicing, and electrical testing tables. This is all new content embedded in each one of these chapters. So general information first, then these tables for the 27 defined electrical equipment assets specific to these chapters. And then again, I showed you earlier that these chapters were reorganized by the tech committee, moved around, or new equipment was added that wasn't there before, or there's actually chapters reserved for specific electrical equipment information to be added in the next edition. Now the annexes, Again, you'll see on the left the 2019 annexes, and on the right the 2023 annexes. So again, some of the information has been retained, right? But some of it's been either moved to chapters or deleted. One of the annexes that I always focused on that I don't think a lot of users were aware of, and where is it? Forums. Annex H in the 2019 edition, which is now Annex E in the 2023 edition. So Annex E in the 2023 edition. All right, so these are informative annexes, but unbelievably valuable. There's 54 unique forums in Annex E of the 2023 edition. Unfortunately, not digitized, so you have to digitize them if you want to use them. But what you'll find is that the NETA accredited maintenance and testing contractor will have those types of forms as part of their documentation when they're actually doing their field tests. So again, but if you are the owner and want your own forms, there is a raft of forms there that you can digitize and use within your own, again, inspection and test procedures specific to your electrical equipment asset inventory and your review of, again, what strategies you want to deploy, the inspections and test procedures, and the maintenance intervals or frequencies of the test. Now, when I say maintenance strategies, right, I'm talking about preventive maintenance, risk-based maintenance, run to fail, right? Those are the maintenance strategies that I'm talking about that you would decide against your assets, again, based on some criteria. And I recommend that a qualitative risk assessment process be used to, again, determine those strategies, then the specific inspections and test procedures, and again, looking at the maintenance intervals, deciding what maintenance interval you'll decide to complete that inspection and test procedure at. So there's an example of one of the forms, in this case, medium voltage vacuum breaker. And again, you know what? I've actually moved quite fast today, and I've gotten to the end of my PowerPoints. Again, I'm concerned about being over, but I've reached the end of the PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to probably open up the mic here with Nick shortly. So again, thank you for attending. Change management is critical for this version of 70B. I can't stress that the restructuring, like it's completely, in my opinion, a complete rework, right? Content retained, but movement around like crazy, right? So you really got to get your head wrapped around that. And then the new content that's been added, specifically those tables within each chapter for each specific electrical equipment asset. And again, it's interpreting this information correctly and through an electrical maintenance program, just like implementing an electrical safety program, that you'll truly take control of this topic, that you will have, again, followed a defined process, that electrical maintenance planning workflow that I showed to make appropriate decisions. So industry standard change and mature over time. It's important you stay current with them. This time, repeating myself again, 70B is like unbelievable. It's changed structurally, content-wise. So you really need to understand that and say, okay, 2019, put away over there, open up 70B and dig into some of the details that I've presented today. Developing and implementing an electrical maintenance program, as I just mentioned, is important. Each company implements their document due diligence with specific interpretation of 70B, and then referencing the ANSI NETA Maintenance Testing Specifications in reference to due diligence to manufacturer's recommendations, ultimately, right? So that's what I really highly recommend that you do if you do not have an electrical maintenance program. If you do have an electrical maintenance program, you need to take a hard look at it compared to this new edition of 70B and what you might have implemented in the past. So major rewrite, and it's now standard. So prescriptive language, again, around maintenance for safety. There is synergy between 70E and 70B with respect to, again, 70E's defined risk assessment procedure and the need to ensure that you have completed adequate equipment maintenance, and adequate or appropriate, again, that's subjectively determined by the electrical equipment owner. The electrical maintenance planning framework, that document that I briefly showed you earlier, right? I can actually open up that document here after I close off the PowerPoint just to show that to you again. again, that's a visual tool, how to wrap this all together and follow that process to, again, assess what you need to do and why you need to do it, and then how you will implement it in the field through your computerized maintenance management system. So you got to train your workers on your electrical maintenance program if you have one, but you're specifically going to train them on the inspections and test procedures that you need them to implement, and then the results that they may achieve to, again, garner the health of the equipment as pass-fail or some level of health, and determining when we need to shut down at a future time to complete maintenance before we get, in this case, possibly an arcing fault failure. And that's why we do infrared inspections to look for hotspots. All right, so 70B specific changes, inspections and test procedures. And as I said, usually, again, I take a lot longer to present. I move through this one a little bit quick. I'm going to break out, and I do want to just show that electrical equipment maintenance planning framework. So again, I want to thank Grace for allowing me to present this webinar. Again, it's a highlights of the critical updates. There's a lot more to it. Please get access to NFPA 70B, a hard copy, or through NFPA link, and review it yourself. But I'm hoping that I've provided some general guidance and summary information of the critical updates to 70B. Ultimately, again, your electrical maintenance program, if you don't have one, I encourage you to get one or start to build one. And if you do have an electrical maintenance program, you're definitely going to have to take a look at 70B 2023 edition and the impact on your existing electrical maintenance program, the electrical equipment assets that you have identified, again, the maintenance strategies, the inspections and test procedures, and the maintenance intervals that you complete those inspections and test procedures at. All right, so I'm just going to break out. I think I've got it loaded. I do have it loaded. All right, so this was the electrical maintenance program planning framework that I had mentioned in the slide. So I just want to end this webinar by saying, this is, in my opinion, this is what you need to do, is you need to start by having that electrical equipment asset list and your criteria for prioritization of electrical equipment maintenance, right? And again, maintenance for safety is at the top of the list, but there's other criteria: regulatory, insurance, criticality of service, legal, and or the cost to repair damaged equipment. And then again, identify your maintenance strategies, your inspections, test procedures, and frequencies, and use a qualitative risk assessment. And I show again, an electrical maintenance program prioritization risk matrix on the left-hand side. Again, complete that qualitative risk assessment. And then ultimately, if you're a large enough company, you're going to have computerized maintenance management system. So if you do have existing electrical equipment assets in the CMS, validate that you've got everything covered off appropriately, and in turn also then review your inspections and test procedures and your frequency and update them as required. Again, document required maintenance and test inspection test procedures with, again, checklists. I said in NFPA 70B there are, again, inspection and maintenance checklists that you can digitize. Again, work orders are issued for PMs, right? And they're instituted and executed by your qualified persons, either on staff or, obviously, if it's a significant electrical equipment asset inspection and test procedure plan maintenance, you'll be actually hiring a third party. Again, as I said, a NETA accredited maintenance testing contractor, and then manage change related to your electrical equipment maintenance program, your assets, again, your strategies, your inspections and test procedures and frequencies, and maintain documentation, right? Often I ask when I'm doing an audit, where's your electrical maintenance test report? And it's not available. And I don't understand why it's not available, but I then emphasize that it should be made available. And for a new facility, it's getting the commissioning electrical testing reports into the maintenance department. And then after that, structuring your, again, electrical maintenance program requirements around this job planning workflow. So I'm just going to open up the mic if there's any points of discussion or chatter that we want to have. I think we have 15 minutes left for that. If there is any questions or comments, I'm more than glad to have a quick conversation.
All right, thanks, Terry. So you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen. That might help view the comments here, but I will scroll back up here. We have a few in. The first question is, do you have a recommendation for software to build an EMP?
See, I get, Nick, that's actually an interesting question, because I get that asked for electrical safety programs. There is no software to build an electrical safety program, or there's no software to build an electrical maintenance program. A computerized maintenance management system is a shell, right? It's a software application to build your electrical equipment, or any like mechanical electrical equipment, actual preventive maintenance schedule, and have work orders issued. So there is no software that I'm aware of that would build an electrical maintenance program. An electrical maintenance program is a documentation system, and the framework and table of contents, as I mentioned earlier, can be structured based on an occupational health and safety management system framework. All right, and again, that's where I do show some information. Let's see, framework. There we go. So this is actually a document that I use with clients to say, well, how do we build an EMP? Well, we got to start with a framework and table of contents, and actually there's a definition which I've captured from Z463 and actually 70B. So here's a definition from 70B: a managed program of inspecting, testing, monitoring, analyzing, and servicing electrical systems and equipment with the purpose of maintaining safe operations and production by reducing or eliminating system interruptions and equipment failures. The EMP shall include elements that consider current condition of maintenance of electrical equipment and systems, as well as a potential safety and operational risk to maintenance and operational personnel. And then a framework and table of contents. As I said, I reference multiple documents, right? In this case, I'm referencing both Z463 and 70B, and you'll notice I'm referencing Z462 and 70E as well. And then I'm referencing the ANSI maintenance test specifications and the acceptance test specifications. And then there's other information you got to consider if you're, an airport or hospitals. There's other information that you'll have to consider that's more of a regulatory requirement that may impact the maintenance, the specific electrical equipment assets, and the actual, again, strategy that you'll deploy, the inspections and test procedures, and the maintenance intervals related to, again, I mentioned airports and hospitals, so be aware of that. And then I reference ISO 45001 can CSA Z 45001, because we adopted ISO 45001 in Canada, but then I reference ANSI Z10, right? And then manufacturer's recommended maintenance requirements. So you really a cross-reference of documents to come up with a table of contents and a framework. And this is where it's consistent with your electrical safety program. Purpose, principle, and scope, industry standards, roles and responsibilities. Now, obviously, there's unique roles and responsibilities to an electrical maintenance program versus a structured electrical safety program. Safe installations, I quoted that's a key requirement, and so in your electrical maintenance program, I recommend that. Then general requirements, electrical equipment asset inventory, the maintenance strategies and descriptions, the electrical maintenance priority risk assessment process, electrical inspections and test procedures, tools and test equipment training and competency, audit, management change, and document control management documentation. So that's a brief review of an electrical maintenance program table of contents or framework. There is no software tool. Again, the CMMS is not an electrical maintenance program. It's a shell. It's a software tool, again, to set up your asset list in it, then define, again, your inspections and test procedures and the maintenance interval. Then you'll issue those as work orders, right, to your qualified persons, or you'll RFP out a major outage for significant electrical maintenance for again, a third-party testing, maintenance and testing contractor. Nick?
Yeah, okay. So the next question is, are existing facilities excluded from meeting 70B? Are they grandfathered into their existing requirements to meet 70E?
Okay, so 70E and 70B are not adopted into OSHA as legal requirements. They're consensus-based standards. Whether it was a guideline, 70B, or now it's a standard, again, it just changes the context of it, which I highlighted in the PowerPoint presentation, that as a guideline, a regulator can't use it. It doesn't use prescriptive language, right? Now, as a standard, it uses prescriptive language. All right. So then, quote, OSHA in the States could say, oh, well, now we've heard about 70B and it has mandatory requirements. So it's not an issue of grandfathering or anything like that. It's an issue of what were you doing for electrical equipment maintenance up till today, or with previous editions of 70B, because the content in 70B, like a lot of it was all there. It's just in this 2023 edition, it's just completely moved around and a lot of enhanced content added. So you could have been using the 2019 edition of 70B and defining your electrical equipment asset list, and then the inspections and test procedures and the frequencies, right? Because you're applying it voluntarily as a guideline, and you're going to voluntarily apply it today as a standard. But what concerns me is, certain individuals may say, well, now you have to legally do this. No, you do not have to legally do this. 70B is not adopted into OSHA law. When it becomes prescriptive, it just changes the context of your interpretation of the standard, and you may want to pay more attention. But 10 to 1, you're already doing infrared, right? So when I hear infrared contracts, well, now you have to do it every year, you got no choice. No, that's not true. You still develop your electrical maintenance program, and you ultimately still decide on what you're going to do for inspections and test procedures. And you take ownership for that as the equipment owner within your defined electrical maintenance program, and substantiate your due diligence unique to your industry and your electrical equipment assets. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think it hopefully answered the question that, this document's not adopted into law, 70B. It's prescriptive language. Interpret it, implement the requirements through an EMP. That's how you take ownership and can defend it as the electrical equipment owner.
All right. And that commenter, that question, he said, well said, thank you. So next is 70B frequencies are time-based reliability. Is it acceptable to extend frequencies based on more of a condition-based analysis as long as we document through an EMP our analysis?
My answer is yes. That's exactly, Terry, we're going to extend beyond what it says in the table. The question provided the answer, and I totally agree with the response, right? It's just a standard. And, I'll tell you, I attended the NFPA 70 2027 first edition review meetings in Memphis last week. And if you could see what goes on in these tech committee meetings, you have better context for understanding that it's a few people in a room that are, quote, people from different industries, different backgrounds, experience. They're the ones that are deciding based on, again, in this case, new public inputs, what gets into the 2027 edition, right? You'd be blown away by the stuff that doesn't get in and the stuff that does get in, right? So interpret the standard yourself for your company with the team. Well, and what I call it, with a team, with a committee, and an electrical maintenance committee, electrical safety committee. So we're collectively within this committee of stakeholders, interpret the standard, and I would sponsor, yes, extend the test frequency unique to your review and your requirements, and you document that in your electrical maintenance program.
Awesome. All right, we still have quite a few people here. Now's your chance. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll wait a few moments here, but I have seen a few questions about the presentation being sent out, and yes, we will. Terry, do you mind sharing these slides, the slide deck?
The slide deck will be shared, and again, like I said, again, usually I talk too long, right? So today's different, right? But again, I highlighted some of the key information that I wanted to focus in on, and again, like I said, the chapters and the rework of the chapters, right? So if I just go back to this slide, I highlighted in color, right, what's going on here, and you can see the chapter movement. So like the content wasn't all lost. The content was moved and then updated and changed, but that it's huge, right? It's huge. I can't explain how significant the rewrite is, but like I said, not all the content was lost. It's moved around and new content was added, and again, the testing categories The new tables added in each against each electrical equipment asset, right? That's a huge change, right? Within the standard itself. Like, so these tables just, right? And it's awesome information because it's very visual, it's very quick to go and navigate under each asset and then look at, again, visual inspections, right? Cleaning, lubrication, mechanical servicing, and electrical testing. I think this is an amazing change to 70B to have these tables within each electrical equipment asset chapter. All right, so like I said, I just highlighted some of the key information. I really recommend that the EMP, it's like electrical safety. You got to start with the EMP, and it takes, someone to sit down and write it, or work with a consultant that has the ability to assist. And this matrix, right? This electrical equipment maintenance priority risk assessment matrix, it's very analogous to the electrical arc flash and shock hazard matrix concept. And again, very valuable tool. And instead of work tasks, you'd have electrical equipment assets, and you go down the asset list and look at, again, the severity, right? And the consequence of that asset, not running, right? And not running, or at the frequency that you believe you need. And then use this information to reaffirm that frequency or reestablish a new frequency. Like I said, this concept is not new in 70B, but this is where 70B is weak. It doesn't have a lot of content on using this qualitative risk assessment process. And that's where, in Canada, CSA Z463 Maintenance of Electrical System Standard does. And this whole Canada-US thing, I personally, if there was a standard on electrical equipment maintenance available in Europe, I would get it. And I would take it with 70B and go, oh, what's the best in both of these things, right? And I really encourage that we all do that. There's global, experts in electrical safety and electrical maintenance. I know 70B is the US document and Z463 is for Canada, but at least start with Z463 if you're in the States. I deplore you to get a copy of it, and it's relatively cheap because you get a break on the US dollar to Canadian dollar, right? But we have some really good stuff in Z463 that's not in 70B, and it really relates to the building and electrical maintenance program. And then the concept of using risk assessment to make decisions, again, related to the maintenance strategies and the specific test inspections, the test procedures, and the maintenance intervals.
Oh, that's a great segue into the next question. But just before, I will note, so yeah, we will send the slide deck. There will be an on-demand video of this. You can rewatch, or you can share with any of your colleagues. There's also a survey in the chat right now for those who are still here. If you wouldn't mind taking that, let us know how we did. Let us know what you're interested in. And all of this will be going out again in the email. But for that next question, if you are new to this EMP, which edition of the document should you get, the 70B or 70E?
Well, no, again, for electrical maintenance, you got to have 70B, and then it'll have the tools that you need to build an electrical maintenance program. For electrical safety program, you need 70E, right? So you got to keep these two things separate. I said there's a natural synergy, right? There's a natural synergy between an electrical safety program and an electrical maintenance program, but the overlap is uniquely different, right? And 70E is a work task-based electrical safety program. For electrical maintenance, it's an electrical equipment asset list based program. So you want to start with your electrical equipment asset list for your EMP, and over on the 70E side, you want to start with an energized electrical work task inventory for your workplace. Both programs will define roles and responsibilities specific to maintenance, or roles and responsibilities related to completing energized electrical work, right, or isolating electrical equipment or operating it. So they're two different programs, but there is some synergy. And then it's overlap now with maintenance for safety in 70B, which was already in 70E as one element of defining normal operating condition of electrical equipment.
Should I focus on 70B or Z463 in Canada?
Well, if you're in Canada, you want to start with Z463, but get a copy of 70B, because there's content in 70B that we don't have in Z463, right? And that's the challenge. The standards were developed by two different tech committees, and therefore the outcome is unique and different. Z463, we started from scratch, and in 2013 published it as a guideline. Then we had a second edition to clean it up, but then our third edition in 2018 of CSA Z463 was a standard. So if you're in Canada, start with Z463, get 70B for the information that's complementary from 70B. And I'm saying vice versa. In the US, get 70B, but get Z463 because it has content that's not in 70B.
All right. I think that's it. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. We'll follow up with you in the coming days. Terry, thank you as always so much for your time. Every time we get you on here, you break our webinar records.
Well, Nick, again, Nick, I wish I had more time, right? You know, that's my challenge. So I really want to thank you and Grace for continually sort of pinging me every once in a while, saying, Terry. And then I had actually talked to Kevin Zamanoff in your office about electrical maintenance, you know, last 3 months, and then you and I got connected here. And again, like I said, it's again, I wish I had more time, and so this time I just highlighted some of the key critical changes, and it's like you have to get a copy of 70B, and now you have to sort of, you know, work your way through it and make sure that you understand what happened in 70B. But I'm telling you, it's a major rewrite. So Nick, I really thank you and Grace for allowing me to chat and present information and stimulate thought and knowledge and power and, you know, all those good things, and plan, do, check, act philosophy, continuous improvement all the time.
Exactly. And Terry, we are very happy that you're busy because you're sharing the very important work of electrical safety. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll be in touch soon, and look forward to the next webinar invitation. Take care, everyone.